Welcome to the Love in Progress podcast, where we deep dive into self-reflection and healing as a catalyst for better relationships and leadership. I am your host and educator, Neena, and I'm here to be a guide to you in that process. Let's get started. I am excited to dive into this content today because out of all the stuff that I have shared online, this is by far the most controversial, most talked about, most questions asked content that I ever offer as far as personal development and relationship development. And that is shadow work. If you're unfamiliar with it, essentially the principle of shadow work, shadow self, is that side of ourselves that we purposefully and intentionally hide because we're ashamed of it, because we resent it, because we have disdain or disgust towards that aspect of ourselves. And here is where it's most apparent. Let's just walk down this example with me for just a second. If you have a particular trigger in someone else's behavior or actions that you're like, wow, that really bothers me when people do X, Y, Z behavior, here's the idea behind shadow work. That trigger, that behavior you're seeing, and potentially even the motivation behind that behavior is a trigger because it's a part of yourself that you disgust, something that you despise, something that I would even go on to say that you hate about yourself. And that's why it's a trigger, because you see it in someone else and it reminds you of a side of yourself that you deeply hate. And that is a real hard concept for us to swallow when it comes to cultivating self-love, because we've got to look at the shadow work. We have got to look at that shadow self. One, because healing happens in the depths of our subconscious, and shadow work is right there. It is right in the depths of our subconscious. Absolutely. But two, we really can't cultivate a deep sense of self-love if we refuse to look at the sides of ourselves that aren't all rainbows and sunshine and butterflies. I also think it also helps us to develop greater self-grace and other grace, meaning the compassion and the understanding that we offer to other people around us, because we realize we're quite human, right? So shadow work. Here's the quickest way for you to identify it. And if you're open to it right now, I'd love for you to just grab a notebook, grab a pen, and let's do the activity together, shall we? So I want you right now to imagine a behavior that you have seen in some relationship or some situation, whether that be in the media, but likely something that's happened in your particular field and realm of influence and scope, family life, work, whatnot. A situation, maybe even an individual that exemplifies characteristics that you despise. Like if I were to ask you, what's the thing that you hate the most? What would it be? And I want you to just jot that down with me right now for just a second. And likely the thing that comes up first is the thing that is ready to be addressed within your shadow self. So let's just take a beat and write that down. You can pause the podcast for a second. And let's identify one thing that you just despise in someone. Okay, now that you have written that down, let's take a look at it. Why is it that it bothers you, this activity, this behavior, this tendency to think or judge or whatever the situation or circumstance may be? Let's take a moment to just reflect on it. What does it mean when this person does this behavior? What's the characteristic behind it that fuels that kind of behavior? Just take a moment. And I want you to write that down as well. Some examples may be rigidity or a tendency to judge others, maybe quick to respond in anger, just lack of compassion, lack of understanding. I'm sure you have examples of what the characteristic is, the actual quality or trait of that person when they're doing that behavior that bothers you. Let's write that down. Okay, now that we have the behavior, now that we have the characteristic that drives the behavior, this is the hard part. I want you to just open your mind here, take a breath with me, and just ease into this idea. Consider the possibility with me that this behavior and corresponding characteristic is present inside of you right now? And if that were true, what would that look like inside of you? How is that showing up in your character and in your behavior? Take a moment and journal that as well. This is tough work, you guys, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for wanting to grow yourself and to find elements of deeper self-compassion, because it comes when we uncover the dark spaces. It comes when we choose in to finding our flaws with the idea and the context that we get to choose into accepting them as well. Understanding that we're dynamic beings, that we're not going to be perfect in all situations and scenarios, but that we do have a growth mindset, the ability to see past our current reality and abilities to that brighter, hopeful future of progressive change. So now that you have, what about yourself that you see that resonates with these behaviors and characteristics of someone or some action that you despise? I want you to just take a moment and just say, I accept the reality that I am, and then fill in the blank for that characteristic. I accept the reality that I am this thing. And take a moment and breathe that in for just a moment. Now, with me, I want you to say, and knowing that I still love myself, and knowing that I still accept myself, and knowing that I choose in to sticking it out with myself, trusting myself, reparenting myself, and loving and accepting myself right now, just as I am. Now breathe that in with me. This moment where we're choosing into seeing a side of ourselves that had typically been shame-ridden, likely an area of disgust or self-abuse or self-shame, taking a moment to just accept it as a part, just one part of our beautiful whole self, and saying, I see you. You don't have to hide in the shadows anymore, is something so powerful. Because here's the reality. We fear seeing those sides of ourselves. We fear that we will become the thing that we despise. And so we are in denial about it. We think, oh, no, I despise that in them because I'm not like that. When the real reality is that there is some part of you that is like that. And I know it's hard to hear, and I'm so sorry I'm the one that has to say it. But I promise you there's a purpose in it. So as we accept this, if we sit in this space knowing that, yes, we are flawed, that we have tendencies to be a certain way, but that we have an absolute capacity to grow through this tendency to create a better, brighter future and self, that's the place we hold, because when we know the dark, we then in turn know the power of the light. So because we know and accept that we have this side of ourselves, this little element with which we have a tendency to self-hate, we can use that powerful hatred for just a moment as a key to unlock a door that gives us real clarity into what we want instead. This is one of my favorite personal development tips and frameworks and paradigms, is that we do experience contrast in our life, some experiences and relationships that are challenging and will challenge us massively, but that they're purposeful in helping us to see exactly at times, not an example of what we want to do, but instead a warning for what we do not want to do and do not want to create in our life. So now that we see it, now that we own it, now that we hold space for it, now let's imagine ourselves exemplifying the qualities that would overcome that shadow self. So for instance, if you see rigidity and judgment in yourself and you don't like that, let's turn the coin over and in turn see how to cultivate compassion, a bit more grace, space before judgment, and cultivate that. Sit in that. See what it would look like, feel what it would look like, smell what it would look like, imagine what it would look like. And we're going to take a moment together to sit in that space, because this is where you're becoming a creator. This is where you're shifting previous beliefs around yourself to not be a detriment or something that needs to be shame-based, but we can shift it and say, that's an interesting aspect of myself. Good to know. Now I know exactly what I want instead. So what we're going to do is I want you to just take a moment. You've got your paper there, identifying some of the characteristics that are not our happy self here, not the one we absolutely love and adore. And I want you to turn the coin over. What would it look like to exemplify the antidote to that specific characteristic and or behavior? List that out just in a couple of things. Maybe you use descriptors like I did, compassion, grace, understand. Maybe you use behaviors. If you're quick to anger and impose violence on people at times, write something like soft hands, hugs, going for a walk, helping yourself to self-regulate before you respond in anger. Whatever that may be, I take a minute here and write down what is the ideal self that responds to that tendency on your shadow self side. Okay, now that you have that in place, this is what we're going to sit with. I want you to close your eyes with me right now. You're going to take those characteristics and you're going to exemplify that into you, into your human form. And as I shared just a second ago, we're going to imagine you walking through your day, exemplifying those new characteristics, the ones that you really want to see more of. So what would you be saying to the people around you? What would you be saying to yourself? How would you be acting? What would you do in your day? What would be some of the emotions that you likely would experience? And I want you to sit with this for a solid 60 seconds right now, because this is your creative power. This is your focus. This is your intention. This is your message to the divine, to the universe, to say, this is what I want to create instead. And I'm going to put all of my focus into it, in creating it. Because if you can imagine it, you truly can create it in a reality form. So we're going to take a moment. Picture yourself walking through these typically triggering experiences where you see that undesirable characteristic coming out. And instead of reacting how you have a tendency to, react how you want to. So close your eyes and let's do this together. How are you feeling? Pretty hopeful, right? And if there's a little inkling of doubt, that's okay. That's normal, because you're having trouble reconciling your desired reality with your reality. And that's okay. That takes a second to recalibrate. But the more that we focus on our desired reality, the more it will become our actual reality. I believe it 100%, both in my life, in being a change agent as far as relationships were concerned, but also in my work as a mental health professional. I've seen powerful familial changes, cycle breakers, generational breakers that come in knowing what they don't want in their relationships, knowing what they don't want in their family life, and coming in and creating a brand new experience for them and for the people that they love. It makes me actually quite emotional, because this is the work. This is the work that you feel called to do. That's why you're here listening to this podcast right now. You want to grow yourself. You want to achieve something greater than where you've been, and you're looking for that guidance and support. And I'm so grateful to be a part of that journey for you. And I'm really dang proud of you. Really, I am. So let's lean into this beautiful creative energy that you have, this divine within you that can absolutely create a new reality, not based on what you know, but what you can imagine. Because if you can imagine it, if you can sit in that 60 seconds, in that creative space, in your mind, in your heart, in your emotions, then you can absolutely bring it to life. Because your body, your mind, your habits will remember this place as much as you continue to revisit it, so that when those situations come up where you typically show up in the way that you don't want to show up, you can shift it. You can go back and say, no, I've believed to life exactly what I want in this situation instead. And now I'm creating it in my actual reality. So my challenge to you, my call to action today is to do this at least 3 times today because it's fresh in your mind. And then dedicate yourself to practicing 60 seconds sitting in the space where you're exemplifying that ideal, compassionate, loving, accepting, grace-filled, patient, whatever you had identified as your ideal characteristics. Practice that 60 seconds of living in that space in your mind and in your imagination, at least for the next 7 days. And then I challenge you to put it into real life at least once a day as well. So 60 seconds sitting with it in your imagination and exemplifying it in your life, in your real relationships, every day, once a day for the next week. And I want you to come back and tell me how it goes, okay? Because I want to hear how you're shifting this shadow work self, the self that you don't absolutely just love, and changing it into that powerful, compassionate, loving, trusting self that I know that you know is inside of you, but just needs some more attention, just needs some more cultivation. So that's the message I want to share today. You guys, really excited for all the new content coming up here. Grateful that you are here. Wishing you all the best. Hoping your life is just abundant and you're seeing more and more markers of wellness in your life because you deserve to live well, to look well, and to be well. And I'll see you next time.